What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you some highlights from the Xbox showcase, which took place on June 9th, which hopefully is the day this video is going live. And it brought with it a whole host of announcements, premieres, etc. And while I wouldn't say it covered absolutely everything I wanted to see, there was nonetheless a lot of really interesting stuff in here, including a few things I myself am very excited for. So I like to use these wrap-up videos as a chance to discuss all of those things in bulk, while also summarizing the actual showcase for people in a much shorter format. So with that out of the way, let's actually dive into this thing. Now, the first thing announced was the next Call of Duty, which is Black Ops 6. They're actually hosting a deep dive after the showcase, so if you want more information, that deep dive should already be up. And while I personally don't care much for the type of shooter that particular game is, happy for the people who were looking forward to it. But following the Call of Duty showcase, we did get a big reveal for Doom. Specifically, Doom: The Dark Ages, which looks to be the next title in the franchise, which is coming out in 2025, and unsurprisingly on Xbox and PC, since this is the Xbox showcase. I would expect that in most cases at this point. But in particular, I've got to say that I myself have been enjoying older boomer shooter type games these days, because honestly, I play and cover so many RPGs that sometimes just playing things that I can focus a little more on the action and just tearing things apart tends to be a bit more fun for me these days. So I might actually wind up checking out Doom for myself. Following this, we had the reveal of the previously leaked State of Decay 3, which honestly I think should be pretty cool. I myself used to play State of Decay 2 a lot before the channel really took off, so I haven't covered it much on the channel, but I do really enjoy State of Decay, and basically it's a zombie game where you lead a whole team of survivors against obviously a zombie apocalypse, and typically the goal is to try to take out these hearts that are spreading the virus around, and you had to manage things like the noise of your base and stuff. So I'm genuinely curious to see what innovations they've made for the third title, and I think that is actually going to be a pretty cool game to look forward to. And then we had the initial look at Dragon Age Veilguard. Now this is actually getting a bigger showing here in a couple of days, so this is more of an announcement for that bigger deep dive. But the Veilguard is actually the old Dragon Age Dreadwolf, which I just have to say is a terrible name. Dreadwolf sounded so much cooler, and I hate that they changed it to the Veilguard. But in any event, we'll get more information on this in a couple of days, and I'll talk more about it then. But it is coming, and I've got to say the art style isn't exactly what I was expecting, but otherwise, nothing too crazy there. But they did reveal here that this was actually coming fall of this year, so that'll likely be one of my bigger later reviews this year. But this announcement was followed up by a little bit about Starfield. Specifically, we are getting the Shattered Space DLC later on this year, which is going to focus on House Va'ruun, the seemingly reclusive worshippers of the Great Serpent that didn't see a ton of action in the main game, so unsurprisingly the DLC is going to explore this. And I think Shattered Space also has the opportunity to continue to improve the game, because if you haven't played Starfield recently, they've made a handful of genuinely good improvements, and it's moving in the right direction. However, that's not the only news, because literally today, Starfield is going to be dropping its mod kit a little later on, which means mods will be officially available, and while this does include things like the Creation Club, more importantly, it means that people will have access to the official modding tools that have been tested and put out into the wild, which I think might mark a significant shift in what Starfield is for a lot of people. Now, following this, they made a few announcements about Fallout 76, basically its next upcoming expansion, which is going to expand the map, as you might expect. But perhaps more importantly, to me at least, is that it's actually going to allow you to play the game as a ghoul, which I thought was just a really cool idea. Fallout games, despite ghouls being a huge deal, has never made them really playable in any meaningful way, so I think this might be the opportunity to do that. And overall, a welcome addition. I'd be curious if it makes any gameplay changes. Now, the next thing we got was the announcement of Expedition 33 that is coming in 2025, but I don't wholly understand what this game is. At face value, it looks like a sort of combination of Western fantasy with more JRPG elements, but then there seems to be like some sort of roguelike element to it. At least that's what I got from the trailer, so I'm not wholly sure what to expect from that title, but honestly it looks super cool, so interested in learning more at the very least. And then next up we got a bit of new gameplay from South of Midnight, one of the games in production over at Xbox, and I'm actually really excited for South of Midnight because if you're unaware, the game takes place within the setting of the rural south of the US, and that's actually where I live. I live in a town you've never heard of in the deep south, and a game that explores a lot of the really fascinating folklore and cultural stuff around that is inherently very interesting to me because I live here. But realistically, I think this game's visuals aren't going to be for everyone. In particular, they seem to be mimicking like sort of stop motion type animation, and I think it's going to rub some people the wrong way, but the premise of this game is very exciting to me, and the little bit of gameplay they showed looks interesting too. But otherwise, it's coming in 2025. Then we got a little bit of hype trailer teasing about World of Warcraft's next expansion, The War Within. That is out in August if you're unaware, but you know, it's more World of Warcraft. I don't have too much to say there. Following that, they teased a little bit of the next Metal Gear Solid, which is going to be Snake Eater. And truth be told, I've never really been into the Metal Gear Solid series as a whole, so I'd be lying if I said this one is of interest to me, but I know a lot of people really do love that franchise, and always happy to see people getting more of what they enjoy. Then we got a series of, I would say, smaller announcements overall, such as the announcement of Sea of Thieves next season and some of the stuff you could do there. Flintlock, The Siege of Dawn, a game that I've mentioned a few times myself and has been shown a few times over the years as it is quite late, finally got a release date for July 18th. This seems to be almost a God of War-esque type game, at least in terms of its gameplay, so it'll be interesting to see if it does anything truly unique, but it looks fun enough for what it is. After that, we got a look at Age of Mythology, or at least another entry into that franchise. Basically, think stuff like Age of Empires, but of course with mythological things going on. I remember playing a version of it way back in the day, and it was pretty fun, so I imagine this one will be as well. Then they had a showing of the next Perfect Dark title. Admittedly, I'm not super familiar with the franchise, and this one seems to be a lot of what you might reasonably expect, showing off things like stealth gameplay, a little bit of parkour, shooting, that type of stuff. So overall, I would say the gameplay does look really good, and I'll be curious to see if it can live up to the hype of what that game is all about. And then following that, we got a cinematic look at D4 or Diablo 4's next expansion, Vessel of Hatred, which carries forward the story around Niriel, and there was a especially gruesome trailer to watch that honestly I can't really show here without getting this video demonetized. But either way, I'm looking forward to playing that Xpac simply because I love the Diablo franchise for the story of it and whatnot, even if the gameplay hasn't exactly been my thing these days. But following this, we finally got a look at more of the Fable reboot, talking a little bit about the world, the gameplay systems, the enemy variety, that type of thing. And of course, some of its trademark, almost bizarre style of humor. And while it was nice to see a little bit of this, including a release window of 2025, I still have a lot of questions, such as what, stuff like character creation looks like, because I loved the original Fable, but then 2 and 3 kind of let me down a little bit. So I think this reboot will be interesting in terms of its release just across the board, so we'll see what happens there. And then we got the reveal of a title called Fragpunk, which is a co-op team shooter, a 5v5 thing, and not my jam personally, but it did have a very interesting art style, and you apparently use cards to activate certain effects in the actual fights themselves, so it'll be interesting to see how that one plays out, I suppose. But the core premise is not my jam. This was followed by a smaller game, I would say, about a mouse called Winter Burrow, due out also in 2025. It looks like the kind of thing where you just play as a mouse and do a little bit of scavenging and just trying to survive against dangers such as the owl they shown. Doesn't look to be my jam, but cool enough, I guess. Following that one, however, we got a look at Mixtape, which seems to be a sort of coming-of-age tale about 3 teenagers, and while this one is out in 2025, I gotta be real with you, I'm a grown man in my 30s, and I do not really relate to this type of thing anymore. But I think it's important to have all kinds of video games, and I've loved a good narrative journey myself, so even if I'm not the target audience for it, I could see it finding an audience in general. Then we got a look at the next Microsoft Flight Simulator, which is going to show off things like charter flights, medical emergency type stuff, alongside simply aerial advertising, agriculture type things. So I think if you like this kind of simulator game, Flight Simulator here continues to be the primary one. And as someone who is also known for getting obsessively into a very niche type of video game, I can understand the appeal even if this one isn't something I play personally. And this one will be out November 19th, 2024, so not too much longer to wait evaluate there if that one is of interest to you. Following this, we got a little more information about ESO's Gold Road expansion, which introduces a new Daedric prince. And if you like the Elder Scrolls universe, I think this is actually a really cool one because of the lore that's being added with that. And while I'm not sure about making any videos for it, I do actually plan on playing through that expansion specifically to see those things for myself. But let's be honest, I think most people just want Elder Scrolls 6 at this point. But I did used to play and cover ESO pretty extensively, long before the channel really ever got big, mind you. This is actually out now, I believe. I'm pretty sure that expansion is already underway as of just a few days ago. Though I believe it comes to Xbox specifically on June 18th, but it's already available on PC to be a little more specific. Then we got the announcement of a supernatural investigation involving the Life is Strange universe. A woman with a supernatural connection to a parallel timeline that allows them to see events and things like that, allowing them to investigate things, especially one of the major differences between these two realities, which is the death of a specific person. So the game seems to revolve around that thing. Now, if you've ever played games like this, they're really more about their narrative more than anything else, and while I do love a good narrative game, they are inherently not for everybody. But Life is Strange Double Exposure is coming out on October 29th, so not too much longer to wait there by any means. Then we got a little more information about Indiana Jones and the Great Circle, specifically some brand new gameplay showing some of the things you could get up to, alongside a mix of a few other things we'd already seen. But honestly, I think if you've ever seen anything to do with Indiana Jones, you get the gist of what this game will likely be, mainly exploring historical sites as we globetrot a little bit and investigate a great circle of artifacts which has some roots in real-world theories that are easily disproven in reality, but nonetheless make for a compelling story. But this one still simply has a release date of coming sometime in 2024 with no actual concrete date. Following up Indiana Jones, though, we then got a further look at Mecha Break, which was announced a few days ago at the Summer Games Show in particular, and this mostly just showed off more gameplay and what to expect there, but that title is coming out in August apparently sometime, though they did not give a specific day for it. Then they showed off a new title called, I believe it's Wuchang Fallen Feathers or something like that, coming in 2025. It looks to be an action combat-oriented game in the style of something like say Neo or just more action-oriented games in general. They only showed a bit of gameplay here, mostly fighting what looked to be bosses, so it's hard to give a complete overview of what it is all about, but either way, looked pretty interesting. I imagine we'll learn more closer to its release date, though. Now, following this, we had the big reveal I was waiting for, which was actually Avowed, and a little bit about its Dream Scourge. More specifically, though, they showed off some gameplay with the combat that actually showed much more impact than the things they showed initially, which I think were to address some of the concerns people had mentioned, including a little bit of myself, to be honest. But still no official release date for Avowed, and most of what they showed here was things we already knew, so no follow-up on that from me. But still looking forward to it, still one of my most anticipated games of the year, and I was hoping would get a release date for it, but no such dice. Following that, they revealed a brand new game called Atomfall, which seems to be a sort of post-apocalyptic mix of things like robots and more traditional things like zombies, so it looks like it's mashing up a few different things together to try to make something post-apocalyptic-y, though this one is coming in 2025 and thus details were a little bit light, but the general premise looked good enough, I would say. I just wish they had shown off a little bit more of it to get a better idea of what it was all about, but we'll simply have to wait. Following this, however, they actually showed off a little bit of new gameplay from the upcoming Assassin's Creed 6, and I mean, truth be told, I initially actually thought they were going to say something about Ghost of Tsushima coming to PC because that's how similar it looked. But that didn't make a ton of sense, seeing as that is a PlayStation title, so I was a little bit confused. But it showed off pretty much what you'd expect, a mix of the game's two protagonists and their differing playstyles. That one's coming out on November 15th, 2024. Honestly, though, I haven't been interested in Assassin's Creed as a franchise in a long time. I think they went very off the rails with it after a certain point, and I just kind of lost interest. Following this, we got a further look at Stalker 2, a highly anticipated title in the Stalker series, which are I think it's safe to say, cult classic series of games. But Stalker 2, however, seems to be a more modern imagining of those things, which should make it much more accessible to a lot of people who aren't able to really dive into the original titles. And the gameplay here showed off pretty much what you would expect. Desolate areas of rundown buildings and the like, but also also anomalies and more nebulous supernatural things alongside the gameplay and combat involved therein, and overall it is shaping up to be something that looks incredibly impressive. Everything they showed here was gameplay and it looks fantastic, and I'm curious really at this point about how much of the RPG systems they are integrating into this game, or if it's going to purely be more action-oriented. But in any event, I think it's looking great, and it is still slated to release on September 5th this year, so not too much longer to wait on that one at all. One of those titles I am very much so looking forward to. And then, to end the show, they gave a cinematic reveal of the next Gears of War game, Gears of War E-Day. Honestly, information on this seemed a little bit on the light side. Mostly it was just showing off some of the franchise's trademark characters and action, with not a lot of details on, when to expect this game or anything else really, so not much else to say there. But that is pretty much going to wrap up everything that was shown at this particular showcase, and I really wanted to go over all of it because I think there were some really interesting things announced there, but I would say personally the things I'm most excited for are things like Avowed, which unfortunately didn't get a release date, and that was the real mixed bag for me. I would say I was hoping more of these titles got hard release dates, which unfortunately just didn't really seem to happen. But in any event, do let me know what you think of all these announcements and gameplay reveals, etc. down in the comment section below, which of course means to like, comment, subscribe, all that YouTube jazz. But regardless of any of that, truly, just thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.